So we're going to pick back up with displaying the data that we've cleaned on a web page. We're going to do that with React. We're not going to worry about styling in this video. We're going to include some basic styles that come with the table library that we're doing, but we're just going to focus on getting that React boilerplate app in place and getting that table library imported. So I'm just going to open up Chrome here. And we're going to use Tabulator. So that's tabulator.info. And I'm just going to go ahead and switch over to the documentation. We'll be coming back to this. We can look under probably quick start or installation, but we'll be using npm. So I'm just going to hang on to these documents right here. I'm going to jump back over into VS Code, right where we left off. I'm going to fire my terminal back up here. So notice which directory I'm in. I'm at the highest level here next to my README, next to the utils folders within here. And this is where I'm going to fire up my npx create React app hospital data. So we'll let that command run and catch back up in just a second. Great. So most importantly here, once the application is set up, always remember we have to cd inside that directory before we can use our npm, or in my case, I'm using our yarn, npm or yarn commands. So we will cd into, hospital-data. And then we can do an ls in here and see we have a node modules, package.json, public readme source yarn.lock file. We can open that up and view that over here in the sidebar as well. So we have a basic React app. It said we can run npm start or yarn start, and that'll fire up our React app and launch a web browser. Great. Now we can see our application is running. We'll go back into Visual Studio Code. We'll leave this running in the terminal here, and we'll just clean up this source folder really quick. Let's get rid of, or I guess we'll start inside. We'll leave app.js here. So this will be kind of the root of our application, and we will just return a div here, just a plain div, no classes. Hello. We are not going to use the apps logo or CSS, so we'll delete both of those. We will get rid of app.css here, if I can click on it correctly. We will leave index.css, index.js, those all stay. Logo.svg or svg, move to recycle bin, get rid of all that. Let's go back over here. So now this just says hello. That's great. Let's see. I'm going to view page source on this. I don't remember if this comes with Normalize or not. I don't see it. So there's a library called Normalize. We can look that up really quick. Normalize CSS. We may want to throw that in later. So Normalize CSS is there. Some of the other CSS frameworks that we may use, we'll use that as well. So I'll leave that open. And we've not talked a lot about how we want to structure these applications. And so we're going to depart here from putting all of our components just in files. And it's okay to have this app, this main app component here as its own file. But from here on out, we want to organize our code a little better. And so when we're looking at this, you can even read this as class app extends component. So when we make these little widgets that we put on the web page, those are components, React components. Kind of the community standard, I guess I want to call it, is that you can organize these into folders. And so we'll just throw a new folder in here. We'll call it components. And here we have an option where we can put the components in here as files. So we could have like datagrid.js. The other convention is to use another folder with the name of that class. And so we're just going to call this, I'm just going to call this table. So this is our table component. Notice I have a capital T. Our class will have a capital T. And I'm just going to do a new file in here, and we're just going to call that index.js. So that's the naming convention there for this is the default JavaScript file in this directory. And that'll let us load this content out of the table component without much hassle. So app.js, we've kind of got this boilerplate. I'm just hitting Control-A, Control-C, copy that over. And we're just going to make this app, we're going to change the name of it. This is going to be our table component. And then it's fine. We can just leave this and we'll say I'm a table. Notice export default app here has the red squigglies. That just needs to be set to table. So we have the table class that extends component. And then we export default table. And so we're just going to save that file. So now here in app.js, if we want to use that component, we can import it just like we did here. And so the difference between whether or not this goes in curly braces, the export default does not have to go in curly braces. So we can import table from, and then we just give it the path. So notice app.js is right here next to components. So that's a dot for in the current directory that I'm in, slash components, and there it is, type hinting out there, slash components, slash table. Now you don't write in index.js, that's not necessary. We're just going to import table from components table. Then we get this warning, tables defined but never used. So when you want to embed these components, they work just like tags at this point. So let me drop in. You put a parentheses here, open parentheses, and we can make our HTML. We can put it on multiple lines here, or I shouldn't say our HTML, our JSX. And just kind of visually clean that up a little bit, make it a little easier to see what's going on. So now we can say hello, and then underneath that, we can instantiate, so we're creating an instance, we can instantiate that table component. And so we'll save the file, and then we view our page and it says hello, and then we can see it says I'm a table. So we want that table to actually look like a table. So now we're going to go to Tabulator, and let's see if they have a quick getting started here. Maybe under quick start. Oh, actually, yeah, we want to go, yeah, it's under version info up here at the top. We're going to framework support. And we're just going to click on React Setup. There's a third-party library you can use. We're just going to use their default and see how far that gets us. And we may run into some issues, and that's fine. And if that's the case, we can revert back. Notice their imports. So they have import React from React. So we're just going to do a compare and contrast really quick. In our index.js, under our table component, you can see we already have import React. So that's fine. We don't need to do anything there. And then import tabulator from tabulator tables. So we can't do that yet because we've not installed it, but we will want that line. Then we import the CSS. We do not need React DOM because React DOM is used down here to render. This part's taken care of up in our app.js. We're not dealing with this. So it looks like we can just grab these two lines and then this basic component structure. So just copy that. And then our class table extends component. I'm just going to let that hang out right here for a second while we move this code around and kind of put it into place. Let's get a little more room here. So we'll grab both of these and copy those and put them up here. And they're going to be red. They're not going to work because we don't have Tabulator. This is important. So the way Tabulator works with React, we're actually going to have to touch the element that this is creating, not just the synthetic or dynamic elements that we see here. And so we can read what it says, variables to hold your table, data for table display. So we're just copy and pasting this and just moving this up inside our component for the time being. And so we can erase those. And then you may have seen this before. This is when we want to load our data and do things before our component renders. So our component has a life cycle before it renders. Once it's mounted, component did mount. This is where we instantiate the tabulator. So this.tabulator is a new tabulator. Pass in that reference that we have up here and set some data, and we have table data. And then columns, we'll have to define our columns here. So finally, the render method's going to have to change, and it looks like we're just returning a div with a reference to that element. So we can just copy that line. So I'm going to delete this that we'd copied over. We've already moved that content up. Here, we're just going to return a div with the reference to the element that gets dynamically created. So it failed to compile, can't resolve tabulator tables. No problem. So we'll hit Control C there. Jump back over, finish. I'm jumping back down to getting started, back to installation. We skipped that part. And so we're just going to npm install tabulator table save. So I'm just going to copy that line, come back over, make sure which directory I'm in. So I'm inside my my React create React app package. I'm inside my hospital data folder. I am next to package.json. I can see that when I do an ls. So I'll fire off npm install tabulator table save. Once we have tabulator installed, we should be able to just run back up here to our npm start command, fire that off again. We should not have any compilation issues at this point. Our browser will load back up. I'm going to close that other tab. And now we can see something rendered on the page here. There's just no data in here, so we can't actually see anything, just that gray bar. So we'll go over to Tabulator. Let's take a look at column setup. And so here's a really simple kind of demo data. And they have tables here, or table data is there, and then the information underneath here. Let's just grab this data. So this is an array. I'm going to grab both of those outer wrapping brackets. I'm going to come back in, and so table data, I'm just going to paste that in, fix my alignment here. And so we have table data, so now we have some rows. So this looks a lot like our cleaned up data. We have an array with these JSON objects here, or JavaScript objects. And then we can come down to column definitions, and you can see that we have to define what we want those columns to look like. And so those map up that there's a name, and that's what's displayed, and then the field is name, and then how we want it sorted, the width, if you can edit it. And so there's all these different options. We'll leave all these in here for this quick demo. And so the column definition is here. We can move that column definition up. So we could just say columns, if I could type columns equal, and paste in that array there. I saved it and it formatted that down. So it moved down a little bit. And so here columns can just be a reference to this dot columns. And so we can save this and go look at our application. And now we can see what it rendered in. So we have the sample data is rendered in. We have the different names. It's sortable when you click on it. And so all this comes out of the box. And so what we want to do, we want to pull in that data that we've cleaned up. Because this is editable, we can come in here. And so we could say, change that name to Bob2 and adjust the sorting around that. We want to plug in our custom data. We don't want to use the sample data. And so I'm going to delete this really quick. So we'll just have columns. I'll leave that first array bracket there. So we'll just set columns to an empty array. We're going to take data back to an empty array. Now that you've seen how that works, we'll put a comment in here, column definitions. Clean our syntax up a little bit there. And so we've got a reusable component here. We have a table that sets up and renders a basic tabulator table. And it's referencing itself. That's what this means. So it's just looking for some property, table data, and it's looking for a property, columns. And we're setting reactive data to true, so we can leave that set to true. And so let's make another component. Let's leave this here. This is just our base table component. We're done with this for a second. And we're going to come over, and we're going to make a new folder inside components. And so this will be, let's do Duke first. So this will be our Duke table. And so Duke table, and then we'll have a new file, and that'll be index.js. So again, that means the default JavaScript file inside of here. And now we can import table from Notice we're inside Duke table, and table's up a directory. We have to step up to components. Then we can get to table. So we just do dot dot. So that's this directory, and then another dot go up a directory, slash table. Notice it commented there. So we can import table from table. So now we can have a class Duke table extends table. And let's compare that to what our table was doing here. Here, table extends component. So table is a component already. So now we're going to extend table. And so we extend table. And this will get, by default, nothing else needs to go in here at this point. It's going to empty class. It'll get all that behavior from the other class that we're extending. Let's just throw our export, if I could type, export default Duke table here. And let's go up to app.js. And now instead of importing the table from /components table, let's import the Duke table from components Duke table. And now we're going to render the Duke table. So I'm going to go back over. We're back to that just empty table rendering in, but no errors, no compilation errors. So we need to get the Duke data in here. So we may refactor this. In fact, I'm certain we will refactor this. And it may be a good idea to let's just do it now. Let's avoid refactoring. So we have this source folder, and we have components. So let's organize our data. So let's just make a new folder here, and let's have data. And then inside data, let's make a new folder, and that'll be Duke. Oh, I may have messed that up the way I clicked on that. I'm not sure why it turned all of that gray. That's very concerning. So let's see. Never goes smooth. Yeah, I'm not sure why that broke on that one. Let's try right click again, new folder. There it is. So we can make a Duke folder. There, now it's back. So we have data Duke, and then we'll just put a file inside of here. Actually, let's just copy the file. So we go up into our cleaned JSON, and we have the Duke DRG CSV JSON. Let's just copy that. And we're inside source data Duke. Right click on that Duke folder and hit paste. And so now we have this file in here. And instead of this leaving this as a JSON file, we're going to make it an actual JavaScript file. And so remember, we need to either A, change the name of that, or keep track of what the name is. So in this case, it's not going to be index.js. Since we know that it's Duke, we don't have to put Duke in the file name. So this can be drg.js. And then when we come into this file, it's angry about a lot of stuff. This is a pretty big file. It's a very long line. I'm just going to make a new line here, and you can see this array starts. And so we'll just say const Duke underscore drg is equal to this array of data. So I've created a new constant variable. And just in front of this, so that this file behaves as we would expect, we can do export default right in front of this line. We can bake this down to one line. So I'll hit save. Hopefully the formatter doesn't explode. Export default const Duke drg equals. That all looks good. I'm going to jump to the end of the file. We'll throw a semicolon on there. I wonder why it's still complaining. We should be able to export the default. Maybe we're not. Maybe we just don't need to say that it's a constant. Oh, that was it. There we go. Export default Duke drg. So now we can grab this variable. So let's go back to our components, Duke table. So I'm just going to roll up table, Duke table index.js. So we're going to import Duke drg from ... takes us up to components, ... takes us up to source. Now we can go into that data folder, /Duke /drg. So we got to go all the way into the file because that's not named index.js. So now we're importing Duke drg from this file. And so if you remember, and if you don't, let's review, this Duke table extends table. In VS Code here on Mac, it is command click. On Windows, I believe it's just hold down control here and you can click on table. Takes you right over, jumps you right over to the definition of table. Table needs a table data property. And so we're just going to say table data is equal to Duke DRG. And then we need those column definitions. So we look at the table definition again, it's just called columns. And so we specify the columns are going to be equal to an array. And we have to tell it what the column names are. So the column names, they all have a code. Oops, sorry, this is an object. So that is name, and that'll be code. So that's what's displayed with the table. And then I'm going to jump back to the documentation really quick because I can't keep this all in my head. So, I'm sorry, yeah, it's called title. Title is what shows up, and then field is where it pulls the data from. So we'll jump back over there. Sorry about that, not name. Title is code, and the code comes from the field DRG code. And so we can go back and reference this. It was DRG underscore code. And then we have a description and an average price. So DRG description and average price need to go in here as well. So title, code, field, DRG code. That's one column. The next column is going to be title, description. Oops. Field is going to be DRG underscore description. And then our last column, title. And here it's going to be, so we have code, description, field. This is going to be price, or we could say average price. We probably should say average price to be more specific. Field, average price. So let's put that in there. Average price. And so I'm going to save that. We'll go back over. Failed to compile. What I miss? Parsing error. Expected a semicolon. DukeDRG.js. So we go back to that giant data file. Let's see what I messed up really quick. All the way at the bottom. Just had an extraneous. Oh, why is it putting that? Let's see. I may be missing something. Let's see. Curly brackets, array, semicolon. So that's the very end of that array. And then let's get rid of that. I'm not sure why it was putting that in parentheses. Maybe that's interesting. Maybe I shouldn't say, this is when you say Lee, stop trying to do it all in one line. So we'll say const, sorry, going back and fixing this, const Duke DRG equals, then open that array. Let's jump to the bottom. There is not a parentheses there. So now I'm going to just hit save. It didn't complain, so that's good. So now we're going to export defaults. We're going to put that back in there. DRG underscore data. And that's just, or I'm sorry, Duke underscore DRG. It's whatever you named the variable. We are just exporting that as a default. So my fault, I thought we could just do that export default all on one line. So now we get clean compilation, Duke tables there, come over, and now we can see all of this Duke data rendered to the page. And we can scroll down and scroll back up, and it's pretty fast and responsive. So now the key to this is we're building on this reusability. And so we can repeat this for each hospital. So we can make a UNC table, and then we can make our WakeMed table, and we already have our Duke table done. And we can group our data as components here. So we're not making any fetch calls. Our data is just baked into the table. The other way to do this is that the data files are either in an API somewhere, so we have to make a fetch call to go get the data, or we can serve up the data through just static files, do a fetch for that static JSON, and dynamically render things. In this case, because we know we want to show the entire data set in a table, this is probably the best way to do it. Now, the page weight's going to be high on this, but once it's loaded, the data is going to be instantaneous. So I'm just going to hit inspect on this. I'm going to go over to the network tab and I'm going to disable cache. So that's going to prevent this from loading anything from cache. Notice this says online. There's a little drop down. This is throttling. So we're just going to slow this down. And fast 3G is good enough for this. So we're just going to slow down our network performance. I'm going to hit refresh on this page. And we get an idea of how long, you can watch these timers go across, get an idea of how long this page is going to take to load on a slow connection. And so it's almost about 10 seconds. We were at the 9500 millisecond mark out here. And that got us to, I guess, the first render. And again, that's slowing it pretty far down. Fast 3G, that would be like loading this page over an older mobile connection. And so that's not bad. That's fine for our purposes for building out this app. We could certainly spend some time optimizing this and figuring out, how to make things load a little faster. Sending less data is the first step to making this load faster. We probably do not want all three of our data tables on the same page, given the amount of data that's in there. Let's see. We'll leave disable cache turned off. I'm going to switch back to online. So there's no throttling here. This isn't going over the internet. Obviously, since it's localhost, it's talking to my laptop. So it's still kind of slow, about 5 seconds to get this page to load and render. I'm looking at XHR requests. So these are just requests that are being made by JavaScript. I'm just going to flip over to the all tab. And let's see, manifest JSON, kind of get an idea of where our timing was slowing down. Just quite a bit of time loading that manifest JSON there. And then our main files. And I'm guessing, yeah, this is where the bulk of our JavaScript stuff is. So we can spend some time looking inside here, seeing where a lot of our data is. It looks like the heaviest file is that 0.chunk.js at about 491K. So pretty heavy web page, heading to 0.5 MB already. Keep that in mind as we build this, and baking that data in is going to make it a little slower. But the page performs okay. It looks okay for now. We can talk about profiling later. Repeat the steps in this video, and I'll let you do that on your own. You can repeat that in order to create data to pull in the DRG under UNC and WakeMed namespaces.